In the beginning was the ocean. Two divine lovers plunged a spear into its depths. The drops fell and became the islands of Japan. These sacred rocks, known as the husband and wife rocks, represent the two mythological creators of Japan. Japan has nearly 33,000 kilometers of coastline, and more than any other nation, her people have explored the rich harvest of the sea. It is spring when loggerhead turtles appear as if from nowhere off the southern half of Japan's coast. They've not been seen since the previous summer, but each year, without fail, they return to court and mate in the shallow coastal waters. The loggerhead is the third largest of 7 species of sea turtle. Its shell, pitted for many years in the sea, provides a useful platform for other sea creatures, and its bulk provides shade or shelter for fish. The loggerhead is not a fish eater. Its basic diet consists of sea cucumbers and shellfish. Yet the turtles which get caught in the fishermen's nets are divine omens, harbingers of a plentiful harvest. Perhaps this is because loggerheads arrive with the same warm current which brings the shoals of fish. Whatever the reason, these fishermen will not harm this traditional symbol of luck. Before releasing the sea turtles, they toast them with sake. But for a few fishermen, the turtle is simply another gift from the plentiful sea. Fishermen from this region learned to enjoy turtle meat while they were away harvesting pearls in northern Australia. Villagers from 3 counties now hunt loggerheads. Sea turtle meat is not commonly eaten in Japan, and many people, unaware of the hunting or the fact that imported turtle meat can now be bought in Tokyo's exotic restaurants, point out that Europeans are the connoisseurs. In all, an estimated 100 to 150 turtles are taken for food each year. Perhaps in itself not enough to threaten the population, but an additional hazard turtles face as they come to the coast to lay their eggs. The females lay on sandy beaches in colonies known as rookeries. Vulnerable on land, they emerge from the sea at night when the temperatures are cooler. Sea turtles are descended from land-based reptiles, and it's only the need to lay their eggs on land which brings the females ashore. It's thought the males never leave the sea. The female digs a nest above the high tide mark, scooping out the volcanic sand with her hind flippers. It takes around half an hour to dig a nest about 70 centimeters deep. While she digs, her tear ducts excrete concentrated salt solution, as they do while she's in the sea. In Oriental lore, turtles, like tortoises, are symbols of long life, believed to live for 10,000 years. The symbolism was reinforced by the fronds of algae attached to the shells of both freshwater and sea turtles, which reminded artists of old men's beards. Symbolic of long life and the promise of a good harvest, this turtle shell was donated to this coastal shrine in 1893 by some fishermen. Every schoolchild is said to love the legend, seen here in one of Japan's earliest color cartoons, of the sea turtle and the fisher boy, Urashima Taro. Urashima rescues the turtle from some schoolchildren who've been teasing it and releases it to the sea. A few days later, a sea turtle invites Urashima to ride on his back. Together they journey through the magical kingdom of the sea. Urashima is taken to the sea palace, where he meets the sea goddess. The sea creatures do their best to entertain and please him, and he decides to stay in this wonderful underwater world. Urashima, recorded in 8th century chronicles, came from a little peninsula on the shores of Honshu. In Japan, every bay has its ancient legend, and many sacred rocks and islands have their names and their stories. Each year, dramatizing an ancient legend, the sea goddess is taken by priests through the sacred torii of Miyajima Island. Sea festivals, which invoke the gods to deliver a good harvest or protect fishermen, are still celebrated in hundreds of fishing villages all around Japan. Japan's islands range from subarctic to subtropical, and the seas provide a wide variety as well as an abundance of marine life. In the semi-tropical Ryukyu Islands, the coral reef forms the basis of the fisherman's livelihood. Corals build a hard outer skeleton to protect themselves, and on these islands, dead coral washed up on the shore was traditionally collected as a useful building material. Corals, colonies of small sedentary animals, need clear sunlit waters because tiny single-celled plants living in their tissues need sunlight to produce the carbohydrates the corals use for growth. The corals create a platform to which other plants and animals can attach themselves, providing food, shelter, and lairs for a whole community of creatures. From a short stretch, perhaps 5 kilometers, of reef and lagoon, the villagers of Shiraho collect 8 seasonal varieties of seaweed and catch at least 50 edible species of fish. Shiraho, like many fishing villages, has lost much of its youth to the cities, but about 30 fishermen still spear fish or set their nets over the reef. Through the early summer, the female loggerheads emerge at fortnightly intervals 2 or 3 times a season to lay their eggs. On each visit, a female lays about 100 soft-shelled eggs. The positioning of the nest and the amount of sand covering the eggs is crucial. Experiments have shown that the temperature will affect the sex of the hatchlings, an unusual feature in the animal kingdom. Finally, the female turns to disappear back into the ocean, leaving the eggs to develop unattended. Turtle eggs traditionally provided a welcome seasonal protein source for some coastal villages. Today, the eggs can be bought from Tokyo's fish market and at a few specialty restaurants. Freshwater turtles have long been eaten for their rejuvenating powers. In the 70s, with the arrival of the health fad, sea turtle eggs became a popular health tonic in some areas, and poaching increased. Poachers can easily follow the tracks of every female. By the 80s, eggs were selling for £30 a hundred. People monitoring one beach in Kyushu concluded that all the eggs were taken, and they began to protect the beach. In the town of Hiwasa, on Shikoku Island, the people have been protecting their turtles since the 50s. In 1985, they opened Japan's first sea turtle museum. The effort to protect the sea turtles was started by some school children who had seen people taking turtles and eggs for food after the war. The children cleared the beach of rubbish which might entangle the turtles and began to monitor the nests. Some years later, following their initiative, children from a neighboring school began a conservation and research project. Today, the eggs are collected from 1 or 2 nests, and working with the advice of scientists like Dr. Uchida, the children bring them into a homemade hatchery. The eggs are placed in crates in conditions which mimic the nest as closely as possible. The crates are not heated or regulated in any way. The children simply have to wait the 60 days or so for the eggs to hatch. The Ryukyu Islands are widely advertised as Japan's own tropical paradise, and in the summer they become popular with young people, particularly honeymooners. Turtle eggs hidden above the high tide mark can coexist with holidaymakers, providing there's little sand disturbance. It's the tourists' facilities and other developments of the beaches themselves which have a more direct effect on turtles. Land suitable for development is scarce, and the coast is seen as a potential area for reclamation. Tetrapods or concrete embankments are used to control currents and provide protection for new harbours or land reclamation. In the 6 years leading to 1984, a further 3% of coast was lost from the 4 main islands, leaving only 46% in its natural state. At Shiraho, the government plans to provide land for a large airport by dumping earth and rock from a nearby hill over the living coral reef. The project has been held up by the determined efforts of protesters from the village. After an anti-airport demonstration, Mrs. Oshima, one of the leaders, prays to the sacred rocks at the proposed airport site. The remarkable fact is that after 8 years of pressure, some villagers are still campaigning. While the people of Shiraho are demonstrating to protect their coast, those in Hiwasa are celebrating because they've succeeded in protecting their beach for turtles. Each summer they hold a festival in honor of Urashima, the legendary fisher boy who rescued a sea turtle. News that Hiwasa was protecting its turtles soon spread, and people came from far afield to watch turtles lay eggs. Once the turtles have begun to lay, it's difficult to put them off, and the crowds are allowed down to the beach. Hiwasa's effort may have come just in time for Japan's loggerhead population. Today, only 6 major rookeries remain, visited by perhaps 1,000 loggerheads, while smaller numbers nest on other beaches. As the last females disappear into the ocean, the first eggs of the season begin to hatch. The mass of hatchlings use their flippers in a paddling motion to climb to the surface, slowing down when the temperature rises, a mechanism which ensures they emerge at night. Instinctively, they orientate to the faint glimmer of light reflected from the sea surface. In Japan, they have few natural predators on land. Most of their problems are associated with the proximity of people. Some are harried by feral dogs or cats. Discarded sea flotsam or rubbish may prevent others from reaching the sea. And many are disorientated by artificial light from street lamps or houses. The egg yolk provides enough energy for them to paddle hard for 2 days to get away from the dangerous coastal waters. Then they drift with the currents, probably in seaweed rafts, eating invertebrates and plankton, but no one's sure where they go. Little is known about their biology at sea, but it's thought that in their first hours they may pick up vital chemical signals, which in 15 or so years may enable the females to find again the beaches where they were born. As long ago as 1959, the Japanese were warned of the dangers of pollution when thousands of people from the inland sea were poisoned through eating mercury-contaminated fish. In the Ryukyu Islands, it's the silt released by development which is killing marine life simply by blocking the sunlight and smothering the coral. People have joined the campaign to protect the living Shiraho reef, in the knowledge that huge areas of reef, as much as 80% in Okinawa, the main island, are already dead. Through the effects of pollution, overfishing and increased demand, the seas around Japan no longer supply the nation's needs. Most of the pink coral and exotic shells sold to tourists in the Ryukyu Islands are now imported from Taiwan or the Philippines. Japan is the world's second largest importer of wild animals or their products. Much of this trade supplies traditional crafts such as coral, leather or ivory work. But the demand for modern status symbols has expanded the trade. More people now have money to spend on expensive jewelry or ornaments. The Japanese have always collected goldfish and songbirds, but now people buy exotic tropical birds, orchids, and even primates, like this illegally imported white-cheeked gibbon. In 1981, Japan signed CITES, an agreement which regulates international trade in endangered species. Any member can take a reservation on any species with which they wish to continue trade. Japan took reservations on 14 species in the most endangered category, more than any other nation. Trade also continues in species on which Japan has no reservation, like the black bear. Gallbladder is taken from Japan's own black bears and also imported. It's used in Oriental medicine, another tradition for which Japan continues to import threatened species. This is the world's largest fish market, and Japan is the world's largest consumer of marine products. Much of the produce is now imported or caught in international or foreign waters, and Japan's appetite has caused friction with other fishermen. But it's the consumption of whale meat, traditionally regarded as fish and sold in the fish market, that has brought Japan far greater criticism. In 1934, the first Japanese ships began whaling in the Antarctic. The technique of using gun-fired harpoons was learned from America, and they bought fitted ships from great whaling nations like Norway. After the war, Japan had 7 fleets in the Antarctic. 20 catcher boats could work to one mothership, landing 10 to 50 whales each day. It was a free-for-all in the Antarctic waters, and the Japanese competed with England, Norway, and Russia. In the post-war period, whale, a cheap source of protein, was served for school meals, and many Japanese had their first taste of whale meat. Millions of Japanese do not eat whale and would be unaffected if Japan stopped. But whale meat, though no longer cheap, is readily available, and some people eat it simply because they enjoy it. They object to criticism from Westerners who kill far more mammals for the table than they do. In the 17th century, the villagers of Taiji on the Pacific coast discovered that they could capture passing large whales using nets. They sent the best cuts to the court, and nothing was wasted. Whale oil mixed with vinegar was used as a pesticide on rice paddies. Any remains became fertilizer. It was said that one whale would keep 7 villagers through the winter. Taiji's culture and livelihood has developed around whaling. In summer they hold a festival in honor of the whale. The boys sing of the bravery and the glory of the whalers. They performed in various parts of Japan as part of Taiji's effort to encourage support for its need to continue whaling. The whalers say they have a greater respect for whales than any other nation. They hold ceremonies to pray for the souls of the whales they have caught. They say they follow strict quotas, keep good records of the numbers caught, and would hardly allow such an important resource to become extinct. Today, fewer than 5,000 people obtain their living from the whaling industry. Each year, as the whalers leave for the Antarctic, they must wonder if it'll be their last. In 1982, the anti-whaling nations of the International Whaling Commission voted to stop commercial whaling for all the great whale species from 1986. Under heavy international pressure, including the threat of American fishing sanctions, which would affect her economy far more than the loss of whaling, Japan has finally agreed to stop commercial whaling for the great whales at the end of the 1987 season. Besides loggerheads, a few green turtles and the occasional hawksbill come to the Ryukyu Islands to breed. Like whaling, Japan's exploitation of sea turtles is tied to her traditional culture. In the far south, fishermen occasionally caught turtles to be stuffed as a symbolic gift, promising health and long life. But about 10 years ago, tourists began buying stuffed turtles as souvenirs. While some turtles are still stuffed in Japan, most are now imported, ready stuffed. When Japan signed CITES, she took reservations, allowing her to continue importing 3 species of sea turtle. In 1985, an estimated 10 to 18,000 stuffed juvenile hawksbills were imported for sale to tourists. In the past, when Japan was closed to foreigners, Nagasaki remained open for imports. Today, it's still the center of the tortoiseshell or Beko industry. The shell of the loggerhead is too fragile to work, and hawksbill shell has been imported since the 17th century, when Beko first gained widespread popularity. This family business has seen 8 generations of master craftsmen. A design is sketched, the piece is selected, cleaned, shaved, and cut to shape. No glue is used and no joins are visible. The more valuable golden pieces come from the shell on the turtle's underbelly. After the war, the popularity of Beko began to wane, but the industry attracted the luxury fashion market with modern designs for jewelry and spectacle frames. There are about 100 Beko companies in Nagasaki, ranging from one skilled craftsman to larger workshops. Since CITES, Japan has limited her imports of tortoiseshell to 30 tons per year, a figure which still represents some 30,000 hawksbill turtles. The third industry, which imports turtle products, the leather industry, lacks the aristocratic status enjoyed by the Beko craftsmen. In medieval Japan, because of the Buddhist ethic against harming animals, killing them was considered the lowest of tasks, and Japan's butchers and tanners were right at the bottom of the class system. Today, for most Japanese, the old class system is forgotten. But for a few, prejudice runs deep, and some people find they're still discriminated against over job or marriage prospects. The leather industry remains an important part of their livelihood. Turtle leather, dyed here to fashionable maroon, is only one of many exotic leathers, and is not as valuable as crocodile or snake. But each turtle provides only a tiny amount of leather from the flippers and neck. And in 1985, the industry imported the skin of an estimated 50 to 80,000 olive ridley and green sea turtles. While the political situation continues, there's pressure on the government to maintain the supply of exotic leather, backed by the distributors and retailers of the prosperous fashion industry. Since Japan signed CITES, her turtle imports have decreased, but she remains the largest importer and has been accused of keeping the world trade in sea turtles active. Well aware of international pressure, the turtle-based industries point out that Japan is supporting conservation projects like this one. Eggs are hatched and raised before release into the sea, in theory giving more of the hatchlings a chance to survive. The industries would like to support more hatcheries in other Pacific islands, where, for instance, hawksbills breed. But international conservationists are generally wary of such proposals, not least because the eggs still have to be taken from the wild. International pressure is gradually closing the doors on Japan's trade in endangered species. As trade routes close and it becomes more difficult to fish or hunt in international waters, Japan may respond by increasing the exploitation of her own resources. Taiji's pride is built on catching large whales, but her people began taking small whales and dolphins about 800 years ago. Whenever things have gone badly, as at the end of the 19th century when European and American boats depleted the stocks of large whales in Japan's waters, they've returned to catching the small whales. Today, in a voluntarily restricted season, which runs from October to April, the boats set off when a school of pilot whales or dolphins is sighted. At least 20 species of small whales and dolphins appear off Japan's coast during the year. Very little is known about their biology, and scientific opinion varies as to whether they're scarce or plentiful. Making use of their protective herding instincts, the boats surround them and drive them inshore. In the next bay around from where the dolphins are slaughtered is a marine park. The fishermen make no attempt to hide their work from tourists, who can witness both spectacles in the same day. The Japanese are generally, like Westerners, dolphin lovers, and many are shocked by the thought of eating dolphin. The Japanese make a clear distinction between a dolphin and a whale. Yet an estimated 30,000 small whales and dolphins are killed each year around Japan's coast. No tally is kept of the exact number, and while some of the dolphins are killed because they compete directly for fish and are used as fertilizer, many are taken specifically for food. While most of the meat is sold and eaten locally, research suggests that some is finding its way into city fish markets. The International Whaling Commission has said it will review the whaling quotas for the great whale species in 1990. In an effort to keep the demand open, it's been suggested that the meat of many more small whales will find its way into the markets. Seafood has long been essential to the Japanese diet, under the influence of Buddhism, which discouraged killing and eating of meat. In the 19th century, Japan adopted the Western custom of eating beef and pork. But she has little spare land on which to raise domestic animals, and about 50% of her animal protein is still provided by fish. In this town on the northeastern coast of Hokkaido, winter lasts for 5 months of the year, and as elsewhere, the harvest simply changes with the season. In summer, they take kelp, in autumn, salmon, and in winter, with steel-hardened boats, they can break through the ice to catch 80,000 tons of pollock. They turned to harvesting pollock when the squid had been depleted from these waters. Through intensive fishing, hunting, coastal reclamation and tourism, Japan is increasing the pressure on her seas. According to some of her conservationists, the high point of her environmental movement was the pollution-conscious 60s. In the 80s, campaigns like the protection of the coral reef at Shiraho are drawing attention to the sea. But in Japan, of all countries, no national conservation body is focusing on the protection of the sea or its wildlife. Increasing pressure may mean increasing competition between fishermen and marine mammals, such as ribbon and other seals, sea lions and dolphins. Japan faces the same conflict between the needs of people and wildlife as the rest of the world. Japan's small but dedicated conservation movement is gradually drawing support in its effort to save the red-crowned cranes. The movement is campaigning on many fronts, but it isn't easy to be a conservationist in Japan, and the movement needs all the support it can get. One force the conservationists are drawing on is the strong traditional place that wildlife has in Japan's culture, still evident in so many practices today. The special Japanese reverence for wildlife, revealed in their arts and their religion, has much to teach the world about the value to be gained from nature. In modern Japan, these ancient traditions could become the basis of a conservation attitude for many people, rather than so few. The tale of Urashima, the boy who rescued the turtle, has a cautionary ending. The sea goddess gives him a box, which he promises not to open. After 3 years in the sea, the turtle carries him to his home village. But the village is strange, and no one recognizes him. Longing for the delights of the sea, he opens the casket. But he is too greedy. Having broken his promise, he's turned into an old man. His 3 years in the sea were really 300. The sea turtle is the symbol of long life, but sea turtles no longer breed off the peninsula that was Urashima's home. The decision to protect the loggerheads brought fame and prosperity to the people of Iwasa. They asked the government to give their beach official wildlife protection status. Hunting turtles is also now banned in this county, and children from about 7 schools around the coast now take part in projects associated with protecting or researching sea turtles. So many biological questions remain unanswered. Where do the hatchlings go to feed and mature? It's difficult to devise a safe tag for such a tiny sea creature. These will fall off as the shell grows. Records of tagged sea turtles are rare because even adults are seldom sighted once they're out in the ocean. The hatchlings are released immediately, for it's not known when they pick up the vital signals which will guide them back as adults to breed on these beaches. Once they have left Japan's coastal waters, they're unlikely to be seen again until 15 or more years later, when, if no mishaps befall them or this beach, they'll return as adults to lay eggs. As the fishermen release the turtles, the traditional omen of a good harvest, and toast them with sake, they wish them good luck. The turtle may be the symbol of long life, but the people know that the sea and its wildlife are not immortal.